Kevin Feige's Star Wars movie has gained some big traction.
Now, this is really interesting to me because when I saw that, and you showed me this article and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
it was one of those, another one where you really didn't hear much. They did that really big announcement
Mm-hmm.
and where Lucasfilm basically laid out, like, here's all the movies that are coming out in the foreseeable future. And I noticed that Kevin Feige's movie was conspicuously absent. Now, one of the things that's interesting is last week we talked about Patty Jenkins possibly losing Rogue One
Mm-hmm.
because of the performance of Wonder Woman 1984. What I've been reading about that now, it looks like she's still doing it, but there's rumors that Aaron Sorkin is actually writing it, which is a really odd. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think that would be cool, but it does show you, though, that you have to be careful. And it was kind of like the point that you made that they don't want to handle, they don't want to hand over because in our conversation, I had temporarily forgotten this is like the next movie we're getting.
Right.
So you can't mess this up.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes me wonder if maybe they're like, you know what? Let's get that Kevin Feige thing going too, just in case. Because that way, if for some reason the Rogue Squadron, I keep calling it Rogue One, if for some reason the Rogue Squadron movie goes rogue, then
Nice.
they'll have like some other movie that they could put in its place really quick. But tell us all about the Kevin Feige movie, Daryl.
Well,
While I have my cantina drink here.
my pleasure. So, Kevin Feige, of course, being the big man with the Marvel Studios,
Oh yeah.
uh, is dipping his hand into the Star Wars world. We already kind of knew that. We haven't heard much about it, but we did get confirmation that the director for it is going to be the same person who is directing the new Loki series, and that director is.
Yeah, it's funny. I haven't really heard that much about that series either. I know it's been.
I saw the trailer for it.
Is Tom Hiddleston playing him?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Michael Waldron.
Ah,
Michael Waldron is the one who's been tapped to write. He's not directing. He's writing Kevin Feige's Star Wars movie.
what's the premise of the Loki series? I'm trying to remember now.
Well, that's on our Marvel show. We can't talk about it.
Right, that's head to head a Marvel show.
But what a lot of fans, and this is the cool part. So this is what I'm really kind of interested in here with with Ronaldo and anybody who else may be, watching the rebroadcast or watching on Facebook may have to add to this. But a lot of people are thinking that he's doing the Vader movie.
Oh yeah, the Vader movie. Ronaldo does say, I wonder if Kevin Feige's movie will connect with Tyka's and Patty's. Possibly Tyka. I mean, I don't know. Who's to say? But I don't think it's going to tie with Patty's only because the whole Rogue Squadron thing is kind of like its own deal. I mean,
Yeah.
it could. The only thing I could say is maybe it'll do the same time period because I'm really wondering what time period this is going to be in.
Well, like I said, if it's the Vader thing, it's probably going to be, of course,
In between 3 and 4.
or yeah, 3 and 4.
I mean, it's got to be. I mean,
Yeah.
again, I would really love to see stuff, even though I know there's not a whole lot of time to play with. I'd love to see something take place between 4 and 5 or 5 and 6.
Definitely.
There's a lot of stories that have come out in the comics between those time periods that have been fascinating. Or, give me some more stuff, say, between Return of the Jedi and The Mandalorian. I wouldn't mind seeing that. Now, granted, I know there's a lot of series that are coming out that are starting to hit that time period pretty heavily, but there's still room. And as far as Tyka's movie, again, we're not even really sure where his is taking place. But it does make me wonder, though, with Kevin Feige's movie, I wonder if this is why all these rumors of Robert Downey Jr. playing Thrawn are coming up, too.
Well, yeah, that's why a lot of people are thinking that Feige's the one who's doing that. He's bringing Robert Downey Jr. in to play Thrawn. But one of the tweets that's kind of gone out that says, "No, Robert Downey Jr. will be put in Feige's Star Wars movie, assuming that the movie isn't a culmination of the Thrawn story they're building up to. Favreau and Filoni know to cast Thrawn more carefully than just to hand it to some A-list actor."
Yeah, I honestly don't. I can't see that. I mean, and the fan base is split once again. Either you do have some fans that are like, "Oh yeah, sign me up," blah blah blah, but then you have a lot of other fans that are just like, you know what? No, this is like the wrong choice, and it is. Like I said, I mean, I love Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
And if he did end up playing Thrawn, I would give it a shot, and it would probably be okay. But he's not the right person to play that role. I could tell you that right now. He is just not the one who should be playing that role. And I think that it's probably going to be introduced in a Star Wars series, not a movie. Because it was brought up in The Mandalorian.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Which means that
you have to
you're
commit.
probably looking at either Ahsoka, or you're probably looking at not even Rangers of the New Republic. He's either going to pop up in season 4 of The Mandalorian, or 3. I'm already way ahead. Season 3 of The Mandalorian, or season 1 of Ahsoka.
Right.
Ronaldo says, whether it's a Vader movie or not, I think Feige will draw a lot of inspiration from the comics, just as he's done at Marvel. I would hope so. I mean, either the comics or the books. I would really like to see somebody.
Well, especially with those Vader novels. I mean, they're done by Marvel anyway, so that would be really kind of cool if he did do a Vader standalone. And especially the ones that you've shared with me about him going back and finding the handmaidens for Padme. And
oh yeah, that's this recent series. In fact, they're still making them right now.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like that whole him kind of going back and kind of figuring out all these different things. That's just kind of infuriating him, and finding out Palpatine knew the whole time, and all these different things. I think if we're gonna, like you said, if we're gonna do a Vader movie, it pretty much has to be now. While you still have James Earl Jones around to do the voice. And maybe that's what they're thinking. And then especially if you have Hayden Christensen around, remember that he's been, getting back into the suit, so we don't know.
Yeah, you're right.
So
the
that's
whole Obi-Wan thing.
The whole Obi-Wan thing. So
if Obi-Wan ties in maybe in a year or two.
Right. So if you got a Kevin Feige movie that's coming out that's kind of centered around that, I could see why, okay, Hayden Christensen is kind of getting back into the suit to play Vader.
It would be interesting. I mean, it's just going to be really interesting because one of the things that I think is really weird is that they never mentioned his movie at this big event they had like 3 weeks ago.
Well, I think that's probably, because they probably didn't have a lot of things in place yet.
And it's also probably because Wonder Woman 1984 hadn't been released.
So I think that was the thing. I think that hadn't, and especially for something like a Vader thing, like I said, they're going to keep that under wraps until they're really ready to release that.
Yeah, that's
because if you put that out there now, people going to forget about every other show that you have coming up because the only one they want to hear about is Vader. So you kind of have to keep that one in the tuck, and especially you want to get that right, because if you don't, you can't screw with that.
Well, I will say this. If they are going to do a Vader movie, Feige would be the guy to do it.
Exactly.
Because Vader almost is like a super villain.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a very much of a superhero aspect to him. And
definitely.
And if you got the same guy writing, this movie as you do the Loki series or whatever, that's cool. I remember when they were talking about the Loki series, and I kind of remember a little bit of the premise, but I don't really remember like what timeline it falls in. Because, that's the thing that they always have to do. That's where actually Marvel has gotten similar to Star Wars. It's like, okay, it's like after Age of Ultron, but before like Ant-Man, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
They got all these movies, and then they have the main ensemble films. So they have to try to figure out like where in time does this fall.
Right.
And I think that so far they've done a really good job at that.
Oh, yeah, because they have like, and I love they actually come out with these things all the time, especially with Marvel, where you have all the movies that's been released, but to watch them in the order where they make sense to the overall story. Like, okay, you might have to watch, even though Iron Man came out first, you might have to watch Captain Marvel first, then the first Guardians of the Galaxy, then go to Iron Man. You know what I'm saying? Like they actually have like the trail of like, okay, how everything connects. So when you watch it in this particular order, all the movies, the TV shows, all of it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Ronaldo says, if this movie is about Vader, I hope it's inspired by Vader and the Ghost Prison. That comic is spectacular. It would be great to see in live action. Actually, any of the comic book series that were the Vader standalone series, I think would actually make really good series. And I'm talking anything from, well, from what I remember with the new canon, it was like around the 2015. Then you had like the 2017 and 1920. You know, you basically have had these. The only one that would be a little strange would be that odd dark something. That one where Vader was shown on a horse, like,
Oh yeah, that one.
you know, almost like jousting kind of thing or whatever. I mean, it was a cool series. It was very short lived. I think it was only like 3 or 4 issues or something, but it was kind of odd. I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit weird. Mom goes on to say, how many Star Wars movie directors are there? Well, it's not so much that there's Star Wars movie directors.
Well, there's 8 of them, but
Yeah, I mean, well, no, yeah, I guess there would be. There's Lucas, Kirshner, Marcan, and then figure like, well, that'd be it because Lucas did the whole prequel trilogy. Then you have Gareth Edwards, you have J.J. Abrams, you have Rian Johnson,
Ron Howard, Gareth Edwards.
I said that.
Oh,
I think that would be it then. I
yeah.
think we covered it. Yeah, that's how many have directed so far. But when we talk about Star Wars directors, these are people that, you know, they come in and direct a movie no different than anything else. It's just you have to be careful who you bring in to direct these movies because just like once again, they're about to make the same mistake. They get all excited about Patty Jenkins doing this Rogue Squadron thing, and then everybody doesn't like Wonder Woman 1984, so now Kathleen Kennedy gets nervous, and instead of saying, you know...
Well, let me ask you this question. Is it more, and this is where I think a lot of it may fall, and we kind of talked about this before, but is it more the director or is it more the writers?
Well...
Because you're only directing what's written, and I get like, you know, as a director, if you feel like something doesn't, you know, come off well or whatever, you will have the writers rewrite some stuff or...
Well, it's not just that, but I mean, even if you have some really well-written thing, I mean, if the director's not giving the actors the right direction, the movie's going to suffer. But I know what you're talking about, though, because in a lot of cases, these directors are writing the movie, which is maybe not a good idea.
Yeah, and that's the part, like, for Rian Johnson, obviously being that case. But I'm thinking, like, okay, but I think even JJ, he did Force Awakens.
Well, it was him and Lawrence Kasdan, though.
Yeah.
See, that's the thing. And then you always had JJ writing with somebody.
Yeah. But I think, you know, when you actually have, and I think that's what needs to go, it needs to kind of go back to the actual writers, because that's what you do.
Well, but besides that, everybody forgets that the original Wonder Woman was actually not only written by somebody different, but somebody else is going to direct it.
Mm-hmm.
Patty Jenkins came in kind of like in the middle. Now, granted, that's not to diminish her role in that movie being probably the best DCEU movie, but at the same time, if you're putting Patty Jenkins completely in charge, don't expect that same movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's not even a question of that. I think that where it comes in is that you just have to look at these directors and go, look, can you give us the movie that we want? Well, it shouldn't matter about how another movie does because it's made by a different
person. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it might be the same person directing it, but it's like that's a different set of circumstances.
True.
You know, it's like you can't base on how good her Star Wars movie is based on how good or bad, say, Wonder Woman is.
Well, what I'm saying is, I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing with especially with Star Wars, it's the writing of it. Like, okay, how certain things just don't make sense. So it's kind of like if you kind of fix that part, then the directing of it, it's not like I said. I don't think like they're like even when we talk about the Last Jedi, like I don't think there was bad directing in the sense of the performances from the actors. I think they played them fine. But I just think that the writing thing, like, okay, why is Benicio del Toro stuttering? Like, why are you bringing him to do that part? Once again, it was a waste. Why are we just throwing away Captain Phasma? That's a writing thing. That has nothing to do with the direction. Because I think that's just, but of course, when you're the director and the writer, it kind of goes hand in hand. So you just look at the main thing as a director. But if you actually had writers to actually write good material that actually made sense, that was, thought of, like we keep saying, it's planned, it's thought out.
Well, the problem is that nobody, even when Lawrence Kasdan wrote The Empire Strikes Back, with Lucas, but it was basically Kasdan that wrote it. I mean, that didn't survive. I mean, Irvin Kershner and the rest of the crew were making decisions all the time, and there were rewrites and stuff like that. It's not so much that nothing stays in its purest form, but you also have to have a director that says, hey, you need to rewrite this.
Well, no, I'm just saying, yeah, I mean, I get that.
So if you're like you said, though, if you're the director and the writer, you're not going to have that conversation. Well, you might say, you know what, the scene isn't working, I mean, because you don't want the writer to be like, I want it how I wrote it. Pull a Michael Jackson on you, But I mean, and nobody really usually falls that deep in love with their own scripts. I mean, I guess there probably are some that.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's kind of a conflict because I think in some ways, especially with something like, depending on the project, I think it's like for something like Knives Out, like, okay, that's kind of an original thing. So it's like, okay, you can do that. But if you got something like Star Wars that's kind of has this whole lineage.
You know what? I don't think that's the problem. I'm going to go back to something I've said 100,000 times. It was the fact that it wasn't planned. That's the problem. I don't think the writing's the problem. Rian Johnson obviously is a really good writer, but the problem is he was allowed to just write whatever he wanted. There was no cohesiveness, or no cohesion, I should say, to the entire sequel trilogy.
Right. I mean, and that is a very valid point, and I don't disagree with you on that. But I'm still saying, like, I think the writing, like the whole Canto Bight scene, like that was unnecessary. Like, we didn't need that. And
but see, again, I think that if you actually had those guys sit in a room and say, okay, here's 7, here's 8, 9. Let's write an overall story arc. That's the first thing we're going to do, which wasn't done.
Right.
First thing we're going to do is we're going to write an overall story arc. Here's a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now, you can do whatever you want. You just have to get us to this point. And even if they go in and refine things, because not just have a beginning, middle, and end to the overall trilogy, but even each movie should have a beginning, middle, and end that everybody collaborates on. So all the movies are basically themed similarly. This is why the original trilogy works and the prequel trilogy worked story-wise. It's just the execution that was bad. It's because you had a guy, even though he did have people help him write the scripts, well, at least in the original trilogy, you still basically had it to where there was a basic outline done of each film even. And then, okay, now you can go ahead and make some of these decisions. Now, if Rian Johnson wants to go in and kind of do what he does, okay, fine. But he's going to be constrained, though, by whatever they all worked out together in a room. I think the problem is that he wasn't restrained. That basically what happened is, JJ finished The Force Awakens, and it's Rian Johnson's turn to come up, and it's like, yeah, okay, do whatever. And then he was trying to do kind of like what you said, you make a Knives Out or something like that, it works great. But you try to make that in Star Wars, not so much.
Right.
Ronaldo has a couple things to say. Now that you mentioned Benicio del Toro, it's amazing that he agreed to be a DJ, or DJ I think was the name of it. And years ago, he refused to be Darth Maul. Yeah, I know, yeah, that is kind of weird. But then again, Darth Maul was a really different character, though. He goes on to say, personally, I think direction is more important. I think a great director can make a good movie out of a bad script. That's true, too. And it is. I mean, in essence, that's true because the direction is everything. Because how many times have you actually read the scripts of famous films, and even though they were the final scripts, it's not the way it is in the movie, or sometimes, books and stuff like that don't always translate well to film. It's because there's a special kind of a thing. A director, you could get like 4 different directors directing the exact same script, and you're going to get 4 different films.
True.
It's all because of the way that they had the the
How they
actors
perceive,
read it,
yeah.
and yeah, exactly, all that
style.
stuff.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. But I'm just saying that there are a lot of things when we're looking at Star Wars that's like that just didn't need to be there to begin with. And as from the writing standpoint, I think that it's like, okay, you're losing, or you really don't understand certain things about Star Wars to that degree. And I think,
Well, and again, I think a lot of it just suffers from the fact that it wasn't pre-planned.
yeah,
That's where I think the writing fell apart. I don't even think because the writing within itself was okay. Where it was, you got a Canto Bite scene because they didn't know where to go, because there was no plan. So it's just like, well, we'll just have them do this or whatever. We'll throw that in there. Or, it started to get careless because there was no direction. It's no different than driving. You have a rough destination in mind, but nobody's mapping how to get there. And you're just
aimlessly driving.
Yeah, you're just kind of, well, I don't know, that looks kind of cool. Nobody is really steering the ship at that point. And then they tried to put the genie back in the bottle when it was too late. By the third movie, everybody's like trying to fix it. It's like, well, you shouldn't have even been in this position. And I think the High Republic is really great proof of what happens when you actually have people sit in a room and plan something out. Or you can go to The Mandalorian if you want to compare a little bit more apples to apples. Because here you got Favreau and Filoni actually planning things. They had said they had planned 5 seasons of this show? And they have rough ideas of it.
Mm-hmm.
We reference it on this show all the time, but when we talk about Cobra Kai, brilliant example of what happens when you have people who actually outline and plan out a series.
Mm-hmm.
And you make little changes along the way. Like, they had said, for instance, if the actress who, played Kumiko wasn't going to return, or Chosen wasn't going to return, then they had planned for that. There were backup plans. So they had the primary plan they had, but then they had a contingency in case, an actor or actress that they wanted didn't agree to come back. Same thing with Elizabeth Shue. And the plan was, if it wasn't her, they were going to say that, the husband was the one that wrote the Facebook message and all that stuff. So they actually had a plan. They actually planned so deeply that they even said, okay, if our A plan doesn't work, we have a B plan. Well, in Star Wars, they didn't have any plan. They just kind of let everybody run loose. And I think that what ended up happening was they thought, look, we got a talented group of directors, and, they can write and all this stuff. And in some cases, they actually brought in writers. Surely these guys are professional. They should be able to come up with something. But that goes to your point that it's like, in any other movie, sure, but not Star Wars.
All right.
Because you have to remember, it goes back to the fact that Star Wars came from Lucas.
Right. And
if you were going to do that, you should have had Lucas write it.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't discredit, and me, I completely agree with the whole plan thing. But I think once you go from there, I think it's like the writing of certain things is kind of like, this isn't like on the page. It's like kind of like, all right, Benicio del Toro's character DJ stutters, and he's like, this guy is a really dark actor. Like, and to get what we got out of him, just his character alone, you didn't need it. Like you said, why do you have Vin Diesel playing Groot? It's kind of like, it's one of those situations. Or
I know.
Why did you have what's her name? Who played Phasma?
Gwendolyn Christie.
Gwendolyn Christie. Okay. Like, granted, don't get me wrong, like, you could have got any like tall, physically imposing woman to play. Like, you didn't need to get her, especially if you're not going to show her face at any point. So what was the, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm saying. Just outside of, I mean, it just might as well just had Daniel Craig as a stormtrooper. Like, why? You see what I'm saying? Just aside from the fact that he wanted to do it. So that's what I'm saying. I think it's just like a lot of the writing, and like you said, like just it didn't make sense.
See, but in that comment right there shows you why, even though I'm sure everybody would have been complaining about Lucas, but see, when Samuel L. Jackson said, "Oh, just put me in as a stormtrooper," he was like, "Mm-mm."
Right. No, like you're too.
No, we're not gonna. If we're gonna have you in the movie, you're gonna play somebody substantial.
Exactly.
I'm going to use your acting abilities and your physical presence and all this.
Yeah, people. You
I'm
see
not
Samuel
gonna-
L. Jackson, you don't think, oh, some this pilly little stormtrooper. Like,
Right.
This Shaft.
You know, that's the kind of thing that you basically. That's the kind of thinking that you need. And I mean, I get it. You know, they're trying to do stuff. Sometimes, too, you know, the A-list actor wants to be in there, but you don't want too many A-list actors in there because then it's, oh, look, it's Daniel Craig as a whatever. But remember when the whole speculation of The Last Jedi was happening? Mm-hmm. One of the things, and we had debated on it the whole time during numerous, well, actually, I think it predates our show a little bit because actually I think the second episode was like the Last Jedi review. But I remember when we were talking about it, you know, it's funny. Sometimes I think that our Star Wars conversations actually were like a show, but they were just you and I talking. But I remember one of the big things that we were talking about, and they talked about back on Jedi Council, too, when that was on, was, Benicio del Toro, he's probably going to play a Sith Lord, or he's going to play some, you know, like... Sith assassin or something, and then he ended up playing some stuttering computer hacker.
Exactly.
Which, don't get me wrong, I'm glad they brought the slicers in because that was kind of an expanded universe thing. So to actually have a slicer being represented in canon was just mind-blowingly cool, but it could have been so much more cool.
Yeah.
Ronaldo says, if the Cleopatra movie is bad and the Loki series is bad, do you think Patty and Waldron will be fired? Yeah, I don't know. I really don't. You know, at this point, it's anybody's guess. And you know what? That uncertainty is what's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why, like, you know, we keep bringing it up on the last probably couple episodes. That's why I love what they're doing with The Mandalorian. It's because if you think about it, like, they're giving these directors... Rick Famuyiwa, you're getting Deborah Chow, you're getting, Dallas.
Bryce Dallas Howard.
Thank you. Bryce Dallas Howard. You're getting all these different type of directors who are doing Star Wars movies. I mean, not movies, but series, episodes. And they're getting better and better. You know, you see the first season, some of the things that they've done. Then you bring them back to direct some stuff in the second season. And once again, like I said, they keep getting better with their storytelling. So eventually, like, I could see them grooming, and to me, that makes more sense to groom your own Star Wars directors, if you will.
Absolutely. That's
planning, to your point. That's planning. Like, I'd rather groom my own people who specifically understand my
it's like
franchise.
a Star Wars. It's a Star Wars director's training camp is what it is.
Exactly.
It's like you're teaching these people how to do Star Wars.
So when you do that, now it's like, okay, now when I send you off to like, okay, well, you know what? I feel confident. You can go ahead, and now Deborah Chow's doing the Obi-Wan series, and now you're getting your own thing that you're doing. So you're not tied to The Mandalorian. I'm letting you branch out a little bit more. Next thing you know, Deborah Chow's going to probably direct her own movie. I'm fine with that because she has a proven track record.
Yeah, and here's the thing, too, just using The Mandalorian as an example. Here's another element of that. And this is another point this kind of goes into what you're saying, but now it's a flip side of that. Nobody, when Robert Rodriguez was brought in to do it, nobody was going, well, you know, his last film didn't do so hot. Maybe we shouldn't have him direct an episode. No, it was like, look, this is the episode. This is a story we want to tell. We think that you're the director to tell that based on some things that you have done. Mm-hmm. Nobody's looking at his last project or whatever to see if it was a success or failure and just ripping the thing away from him if that wasn't the case.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think that Lucasfilm has to stop doing. They have to stop looking at the last thing that they do. It's one thing if they do that before they hire them. What's killing me is they hire them, and then in a lot of cases, they announce that they've been hired.
See, that's why I really want to know what happened. I really would love to hear the backstory on the Colin Trevorrow thing. Like, what really made Kathleen say no?
Yeah, I mean,
because everybody loves the Duel of the Fates script. So, to your point earlier, you were saying like, okay, how many times have you seen scripts that are like, all right, this looks amazing, but we don't know how it's going to translate to film.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe his direction, like you said, could have been off. And so then, like, if the script was good, his direction might have been off. And so now you don't get a good movie. So I'm wondering, what was it that really just made them...
Because, once again, I don't remember what it was. It was the movie that he had made that came out around the time that he was making Episode 9, bombed, and they got nervous and pulled the plug on him. Once again. And it's like, okay, but Jurassic Park was pretty successful, though.
Yeah.
So was another one that he did. So it's kind of like, okay, you're looking at the last thing he did and it bombed or whatever, but why did it may not have been anything that, and if it was him, maybe it was because it was under a different set of circumstances or whatever, but you can't just announce a thing and let a guy start working on a movie and doing all this and then go, well, you know what, your last movie bombed, so we're going to take it away from you.
You know what's funny is that, like, bring in, I think, correct me if I get the timeline wrong, but so they bring in Rian Johnson because his last movie was good, but then he bombed Last Jedi, but then makes Knives Out, which is successful.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like,
that's true.
Your movie, because you thought that because the last one was successful, but then yours, though, your movie is the one that bombs, but then the one afterwards.
And not only that, he made the movie that divided the entire fan base, created toxicity in Star Wars, and forever divided and destroyed the invincibility of Star Wars. And exactly.
But then the movie right after it, though.
And then the movie right after it, everybody
is like praising.
Praising, and it's amazing. It's up for all these like Academy Awards and all this stuff. And, you got to figure that now Rian Johnson's all like, my friend here thinks it's just fine, and that's such a nice vindication thing for him because, again, you can't go by that, and that's just irresponsible decision making, in my opinion, on the part of Lucasfilm. I mean, it would be, it's funny because people joke around, getting all these guests. It's like, it would be really hard if we actually got Kathleen Kennedy on the show.
Because you want to rip into her?
You'd want to. And you would probably just start doing these soft little digs, like not enough to make her rip off her mic and, hang up the Zoom or whatever. But, you can't just be like, oh, yeah, we love you. Because, I mean.
Yeah. No, I mean, I would just ask, I would honestly like, okay, walk us through what happened. That's all I want to know. Like, because my thing is like, we can armchair quarterback this thing, and we can, but I don't know what happened. You know what I'm saying? So like,
if only we had the kind of viewership that she would agree to come on here and this is the show that, yeah, okay, with you guys, I'll let you guys know what happened. I kind of wish, or she might be like, you know what, you only have like, under 100 viewers per thing or whatever. Maybe you're the show that I'll do that with or whatever. But I don't know. Ronaldo says, if I'm not wrong, Colin's last film got bad reviews. No, you're right. That's what we're saying. Added to the fact that he really wanted to make a sequel to The Last Jedi. The combination ended up killing him. But the thing is, though, and this is what's really weird, and this just kind of shows you how you can easily flip the script on a movie. So The Last Jedi is looked at as bad, right? I got it. But the fact that if you paired it with Duel of the Fates, it actually changes the nature of The Last Jedi. I'm not necessarily saying that it rights every wrong, but it puts it in a new perspective where it's not as bad.
Mm.
If you remember the script of Duel of the Fates. And that's where I think that it was a strength, but I think, Ronaldo, you're correct in the sense of she probably was like, oh, no, we gotta retcon it. But then again, if you talk to JJ and all those guys, they say, well, they didn't retcon it, and they'll point out specific areas where they did not retcon The Last Jedi. In JJ Abrams' opinion, he made a sequel to The Last Jedi. It was just that he changed the tone and he made it a little bit different. The other thing, too, with Colin Trevorrow's version, you would have had to recast Leia. There'd be no way around it. She was way too heavily. There's no reusing old footage of Carrie Fisher on that one.
You're right.
You know, I mean, you would have had to like create a CGI. She would have had a Jar Jar or something.
Yeah.
Get somebody in a mocap suit and, you know, basically paste her face on and go from there. If you're going to do it that way. But, I mean, that is an interesting thing. And this is kind of a new era of filmmaking in that they're doing this, is that you get these people that are so unsure what their franchise is. It's like, you can't make movies like that.
That's why they need to let Filoni and Favreau run it.
Yeah, because here's some guys that really know. They get it. They know what it is that they want. They know what it is they're looking for. They're like, okay, look, this is a story we want to tell. This is a director that we want to use to tell it. It's not based on your last movie. It's not based on anything, you know, esoteric or weird. It's just very simple. You come in, you do the job. If we didn't think you can do the job, we wouldn't have brought you in the first place. And that's one of the reasons why it's successful. You don't see this whole crazy thing, you know, because if you think about it, it looks really bad on Lucasfilm's part when you hire a director and then you fire him like a week later.
Yeah, you look unstable. And you don't look like you don't know what you want or what you're doing. Like, okay, well, why
exactly.
did you... Yeah.
Exactly. Because if they jack up Patty Jenkins's thing any more than they already seem to have, if they actually bring in Sorkin to write it, now maybe that was always the plan, I don't know. But if they start having this knee-jerk reaction to the whole Wonder Woman thing, it's like, well, okay, now you're just going to look like you have no idea. Trust me, Patty Jenkins will get another film job. She'll get another directing gig. She's not going to be hurt from this. You know, I mean, hopefully Wonder Woman 3 is a little bit better, but they haven't ripped Wonder Woman 3 away from her. It's kind of like, okay, if that's another thing too. It's like if Wonder Woman 1984 has been getting these really bad reviews, which it has, and it's a mediocre movie at best, okay, that the DC studios would be way more justified in going, you know, maybe we're going to go with somebody else for Wonder Woman 3. They'd be way more justified in doing that than Kathleen Kennedy saying, well, you know, that movie in that other franchise didn't do so well, so we're going to take away this movie from you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of like if DC's letting her make the third Wonder Woman film, which it looks like that's what's happening, then why would you, when you're in a completely different franchise? Now, I get it, though. There is the other side of that argument, which says, listen, Star Wars is a very fragile, very laser-focused thing. It's not like other franchises. You have to be right on. But my point is, if she was good enough, if you felt she was good enough to make the movie in the first place, that hasn't changed.
Right.
You know, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to say, well, let me see the movies that you have in development. Let me look at the dailies. Let me see what's going on there.
Ronaldo says, I think Duel of the Fates and Last Jedi is similar to the case of Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. Fans hated the story, but they loved the progress it made.
Yeah. With Duel of the Fates, though, I think it was actually almost the opposite. I think they really loved the story. Most people seem to really love the story. With The Last Jedi, I think that they liked, if they liked anything, they liked the chances it was taking.
Yeah, there's parts of the story that they like.
Right. I can't say they really liked the story because the problems were, if you really take it at a sort of a macro level, if you had like a top 3 things that everybody hated, it was really, it was Luke's characterization that they hated.
Right.
They hated that. They hated the fact that it had like a kind of a Marvel humor type of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they hated the fact that it was like a Battlestar Galactica episode more than a Star Wars film. And the Canto Bite scene sort of falls in there too because it was not Star Wars-y to people.
And then if you had another big one is the underuse of really good actors or actresses.
Yeah, and even the characters too, because
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and
Finn being the biggest.
Yep, Finn, DJ, Phasma,
Sure.
Maz.
Yeah.
You know,
the Maz scene was completely unnecessary.
Yep.
If you're gonna have her in the film, have her do something more substantial.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, there were all kinds of really weird issues in there, and of course, nobody really liked the Rose character.
Right.
You know, it's like Kelly Marie Tran's performance aside, it was fine. It was just the character was just not
needed.
Yeah, and I understand what they were trying to do. They were trying to make a everyman's character, kind of like almost like sort of, well, even though this is a little bit more comedic, but Star Trek Lower Decks, which is absolutely hilarious. But the idea for the non-comedic part was like, look, you're seeing everything from the bridge and all these main, the main ranking characters.
Mm-hmm.
What about the guys that are just kind of in the lower decks and how they're being affected by all this?
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of what I think that they were trying to do with the Rose character was like, look, you basically have these people who are heroes too that aren't necessarily, holding some ranking position on the ship or something. They're just, whatever.
Yeah. Ronaldo says, what I was referring to is that fans hated The Last Jedi and Attack of the Clones, but they loved the progression of those stories.
Ah.
Yeah. I figured that's where he was going with it. Yeah, I mean, Attack of the Clones was the weakest out of that, out of the series, I guess, if you will.
I think so. I mean, the funny thing is that I enjoy
story-wise, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy watching Attack of the Clones more than I enjoy watching Phantom Menace usually.
Mm-hmm.
But I still say that Attack of the Clones is far weaker than the Phantom Menace as far as the story and as far as a lot of the, the acting is a little bit worse. And I mean, man, at least you have Liam Neeson for Phantom Menace.
Right.
It's like, I don't know what some of that stuff was. You did have Padme in her white pants, though. That was the saving grace of Attack of the Clones. But.
And you had Yoda. That's the first Yoda duel.
Yeah, that was the first Yoda duel. And again, I mean, you could almost say, and this is where I think Ronaldo's point comes in, really loud here, is the fact that there were elements of Attack of the Clones that were really good. Like Dooku, for instance.
Well, you really got a chance to kind of see the descent. And, you brought this up before, that they could have started the prequels with Attack of the Clones.
Yep.
And then moved on from there and kind of stretched that out into maybe even got into like Revenge of the Sith could have been like a little bit more like Anakin as Vader, at that point. But
what I think that they should have done was actually had like an episode 2.5 to where you can have parts of Revenge of the Sith maybe be the end of 2.5.
Right.
Have a little bit more of Clone Wars type of thing in 2.5. And then, of course, episode 3 could have been, like, say, maybe started, be 2/3 Revenge of the Sith, and then maybe a little bit after that. Get a little bit more of Anakin as Vader, either in the suit or out of the suit. I remember that was a big debate at that time, too. It was like, there were rumors that the last third of the movie was going to be Vader in the suit.
Right.
And everybody was speculating, when does he turn into Vader? When's he Vader, kind of like non-injured Vader, and then when does he become in the suit Vader? And that was like a big thing. And then it turns out, much to everybody's disappointment, you got to see Vader in the suit, but it was like the very end of the movie. And he didn't do anything except lumber and
scream no.
And then scream no, which, happened to, thank you, special edition on that one. That was crazy.
Ronaldo also says, so I think they should have let the story progress, Duel of the Fates, instead of rewriting it, Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that they could have done, and we never really talked about this before, they could have actually just had JJ make Duel of the Fates.
True.
You know, they could have, and maybe they could have altered the story a little bit. So, and I think that this goes back to your question on,
Well, then
was it really Colin Trevorrow that they didn't like?
Well, then once again, you still couldn't really do that because you still needed someone for Carrie Fisher.
Yeah, and you know what?
And I think that's why
Maybe
they brought
that was-
JJ,
yeah.
because he had a contingency plan. Like, okay, well, I have footage that I have from, my movie that I could
that maybe
use.
they could do, and he kind of
He
rewrote
wrote
it around
with
that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true. The Carrie Fisher death thing really put.
Yeah.
If only it hadn't happened for a few more years, it's kind of like, okay, well, she could have just hung on for another couple of years.
Man.
I mean, that was one of the things that was really weird, especially because she was relatively young.
And she was happy. I mean, she was happy to be back in Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, it was so sad. I remember we were actually at the studio because it was when Christmas break was about to start. It was the last day that we were in school. And we had stayed late, and we were about to leave, and that's when the story came through that she had a heart attack.
Yeah.
And then, of course, she died like 3 days later. Because I remember we found that out when we were having lunch with
Shannon.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. And she was just like, well, it was Princess Leia died and all that. And we're like, whoa, what?
We're like,
we weren't
no.
that she was like stable or whatever. What?
Yeah, it was like, no, she just passed like a couple hours. I'm like, no.
That was not a cool time to find out when you're trying to talk to somebody about, business and all this other stuff. And it's like, you know what? We're going to have to reschedule this because I need some time. And I mean, that's the thing, is that she was young enough. We all thought, okay, fine. She had a heart attack. She'll pull through this. No problem. But she didn't. In fact, there were even memes that was like, 2015, you thought you'd take me. And then it's kind of like, well, she kind of did, though. She's gone. So that was just unfortunate. And I think that, they had to do something. And that's what they ended up choosing to do. It was just, so you're right. They had to do that.
Yep.
But that's going to, I think, wrap up that section. So let us know, what you guys think of Kevin Feige's movie. Do you think that it's going to be a Vader movie? Do you think it's going to be a Thrawn movie? What do you actually think Feige's movie is going to be? And more importantly, when do you think it's going to be released? Let us know in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the like button, the notification bell. Like, hit every button you can think of except for the dislike button. We don't like the dislike button.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.